this. And so just again to clarify, the PowerPoint presentations have to be live. And the second thing is that the plays also should be live, because, traditionally when we are in a class setting, that's what we've been doing, that, you present a play in front of the class has the opportunity to ask you questions when you're there. So, that's what, we've tried to kind of adapt it to the online platform. So if it's live, it just makes it a little bit more real than a recording. But I know some of you guys have come up to me, to say, various reasons. If you've had that you couldn't do an online, then yes, I have given that exception that you can do it as a video. But so whoever's turn it is for that week, all those three people or the six, people should be available, with their ability to turn on their cameras as well as the microphone, answer questions, and to show your faces. So it's cannot be that you're not showing your face, or not have the ability to turn on your camera. So that is a must. Otherwise, you lose points for that. Okay, I think we're almost close to beginning. I'm just looking. We still have a few more minutes, so I'm just waiting for everybody to join. So, as any questions at all, you can unmute yourself and ask. Okay. So, Jennifer, you're asking, are both PowerPoint and paper required? So no, I did try to make it a little bit easier. So in case, you have the PowerPoint ready, the main thing is that you should follow the rubric, that it should meet all the requirements of all the details. So there were I believe there are six things that I'm asking you to include in your paper or your PowerPoint. So those are the ethnic values, the family structure, customs, health issues, types of food, possible solutions to the dilemma. So as long as it's a detailed, explanation of all of these that are included in the PowerPoint, as well as the bibliography. So the last PowerPoint should be then the bibliography. So as long as everything is included in the PowerPoint, then yes, you could submit it as a PDF. But if your PowerPoint is more like pictures and you're, trying to just speak it out with not a lot of information written on the PowerPoint, then just write it on paper and submit it. So I hope, that's clear. Okay, and I think it's time. We still don't have everybody yet, but we'll go ahead and start.
Hi, Dr. Berg. Miss calling me. She told me that she's still trying to get on. Her internet is not stable.
Okay, no worries. So we'll just wait for her to get on, and then I will take the attendance. But thanks for letting me know. Okay. All right. So, we're doing again. Remember, we had already started last week. We had a little gap because there was all the CODA meetings going on. So we couldn't really get to this lecture. So I'll try, this one is a little bit longer, but the next one is short. So hopefully I'll be able to get it done, before an hour and a half, I'm hoping. But hopefully sooner. So we'll see. But anyway, so this is again a continuation of, cross-cultural concepts and communication. So we're going to go ahead and start that. So in a global society, what you as an RDH must have is the ability to integrate the current knowledge of the oral health care with the ways of the multiple cultures, right? So, so I just included a picture here. So we talked about it last time as well, that, some other cultures may not be using a toothbrush, but here it's showing a miswak stick. It's a, oral hygiene aid that's used in Asia, Africa, Middle East, South America, and it may be used not just for interdental cleaning. It initially starts as interdental cleaning. Once it kind of the bristles sort of form, then the people are using it for brushing as well. So, it's just the ability to be able to integrate, not the oral healthcare as we know of, but also that might be a little bit different from us. So, why do we need to study the cultural competence? So this is actually a requirement of CODA. So they were here last week. So this is, the CODA requires the cultural competence to be a part of your dental hygiene curriculum. So here it's just included what the CODA states is that the graduates must be competent in interpersonal and communication skills to effectively interact with diverse population groups and other members of the healthcare team as well. So it's not just being able to interact with your patients, but also being able to interact with other diverse populations that you have even within the healthcare system. It may be your dentist or, the hygienist, maybe assistant or the specialist that you could be, communicating with. So the other thing is, you have to be able to communicate verbally and in written form to have a safe and effective, oral healthcare, provision and instruction for diverse populations. So you do have to recognize the cultural influences. They do impact the delivery of healthcare services and how much knowledge that the patients are getting from you and whether they will return to get that care from you. So that is why the cultural competence, and we lay so much stress because it is a requirement of CODA as well, because they realize that it is very important, especially in today's scenario. Okay, so cultural competence. So when we say attaining cultural competence, it's that it's not a mastery of the subject. You're never going to be able to master this topic. It's more about learning lifelong. It's, you keep on learning as you go along. And some people just call it cultural humility, being humble enough to, being open to learning about other cultures and not being just closed to, anything or any devices, anything, oral hygiene aids or any values that are different from you. So that's called cultural humility. Then what does always start with? Attaining the cultural competence, it always starts with being self-aware or self-assessment, which means that first you want to, look within yourself and see what sort of a personal health beliefs do you have? Do you have any traditions that you may follow? Or do you have a bias that may influence your ability to relate to other cultures, to, other values? So, this is all a part of self-assessment, and that is always the number one thing in moving towards that goal of cultural competence. So what else? So, let's start from here. So first is awareness, or self-assessment. Then you try to avoid stereotypes, right? And I think we talked about that before as well. You recognize your own biases, and therefore, when you do realize your own biases, you will try to avoid the stereotypes that you may have been thinking all along, or the whole entire life of yours. Then we come to, being open to learning about cultures and then gaining those different or unique experiences. We value diversity. So here we talk about valuing diversity means not just kind of trying to tolerate diversity, like, okay, I live in a very area which has a very diverse population, I'm just kind of tolerating it through. No, you value it, you realize the uniqueness about that diverse population. And then finally we come to being engaged. with the community around you. So that will be your final step. First, your cultural, competence will be within the community just around you, and that's where you practice it, and then to a larger population. So, we already, I think, talked about this non-judgmental, and these two. And then you actively try to acquire some knowledge regarding patients' beliefs, behaviors, their norms. And finally, it's the dental hygiene process of care. You adapt that to that particular patient or that unique situation. Okay, so we'll be going over all of these. What's a race? What's a ethnicity? So, what's a culture? What's a counterculture? So, all these terminologies, you should be able to know what the definitions are. I mean, it's not going to be, of course, answer a short answer question in your finals, but you will have different options, so you should be able to recognize what definition goes with what name. So if it's race, what is race? It's defined as a grouping of humans who share certain distinctive physical traits. So that's what you have to remember. Race is grouping depending on the physical traits. So now, when we say race, it was, just like a social divide that was created. And these geneticists now agree that it's just a social construct. It was meant to sort of divide people into different social groups depending on their outward appearances. And at that time, which maybe, I don't know, centuries ago, when this concept of race started, it was presumed that because people have different physical, characteristics on the outside, they will have a lot of genetic differences as well. So that was what their presumption was, which now we know, now that we have all the DNA testing and everything, we know that that's not really true. So I was looking at, a study of all the genetic, DNA study, and it said that within one race, so if one race, it could be, let's say Hispanic race, or they may call it like white or black, whatever that may be. Okay, so within that one race, it said there is the variation, the genetic variation or the DNA variation that we see within a race is 94%. Okay, so we are, even within that same race, there's a lot more variation in between, say black to white or white to Hispanic, whatever. The variation is only 6%. So that shows that there was just no meaning to these grouping, because they presumed at that time when there was no DNA testing that, okay, if the physical characteristics are so different, we are very different internally, genetically as well. But we've seen that's not really true. And so, this was sort of done, maybe there was one dominant race, they divided it to, the people into called different races, and they may have called themselves superior over another race. So these were all just social constructs. This has nothing internally to it. And so, that example of, that where one dominant race would have presumed that we are superior to others was that the horrific, Nazi Holocaust, where it was presumed or tried to portray thus their own superiority over the Jews, and that therefore that Holocaust happened. But now that we have all the genetic testing, there is nothing to say that we're any one race is very different from another race. So what we have to remember about race, again, is that it's how people view us, or how we're viewed on the outside. So based on the visible traits. Okay, it could be how do the people identify us as? It would be skin, it would be depending on the facial features, how the hair texture or the color is, and these features are genetically inherited. Okay, so then we come to ethnicity and how is ethnicity different? I'm sorry, from race. So ethnicity is defined as large groups of people classed according to a common, maybe racial or national or tribal or religion, language or cultural background. And ethnicity is different because individual, like if it's me or if somebody else, you may self-identify yourself as a particular ethnicity. It's not your outward appearance alone that defines the ethnicity. Okay. So these are different examples. Ethnicities could be anything, and the example that I gave here, it's mostly more like national rather than a certain tribal. But it could be within that certain nation. There could be different ethnicities as well, depending on different tribes or communities. So ethnicity, what it reflects is more like heritage and tradition, maybe similar language that's passed on from one generation to the next. So the same ethnicity would, maybe have similar diet or food preferences, similar language or a dialect. Maybe their work habits and behavior are similar, or their religious beliefs. They may have similar methods of dealing with death and illness. Okay, so now that we, kind of went over both, so this is a good one to kind of show how race and ethnicity are different. Okay, so race, again, remember, is your outward appearance. Okay, so your physical traits, that's skin, hair, facial appearance, your body type and everything. Ethnicity is more, the things that you don't see. This would be your language, your religion, your customs, traditions, foods. So ethnicity, you can say it's linked with cultural expression and identification. Again, all of these, remember, it's more just social constructs used to categorize and characterize populations into distinct, groups. So, just giving you an example, let's say a child who is born in Korea, okay, to Korean parents, okay, got adopted to Italian parents in Italy. So as a baby, that a child has been growing up in Italy. So when that child grows up, all that child knows is the Italian traditions, the Italian culture, Italian, the language, and knows nothing about his or her country of birth, which is Korea. So has no awareness of that language, of the values or anything. So that child will identify their ethnicity as Italian. Okay, so because that's what that child knows, the Italian language, whatever religion the parents follow, their customs, their traditions, their foods, right? But now that child goes to somebody somewhere where they don't know, and they just look at him and they will say, okay, you belong to an Asian race. So so the race is the outward appearance, because that's what the outward appearance is. The outward appearance is still Asian, Korean, but ethnically the child will identify as Italian. So that's how ethnicity and race are different. Or even here, we may say ethnically it may be Irish and Polish. Okay, so but the race could be maybe white, or they're black. So that's how it's written. So I hope I got it clear. The race is more the outward appearance, how people see you as. Ethnicity is what you identify yourself as, what language and customs and traditions that you follow. So that's what ethnicity. Okay, so endogamy, what that word means, it's marrying within your ethnic group, or your same, maybe the same religion, it may be the same tribe, it may be the same community. So that's called endogamy. So why is this fall, or why is this important, especially when we're talking about immigration and a lot of diversity in the US, is because it's a lot of displanted cultures, right? So we have a lot of cultures that have been uprooted from their origin, and then they've moved here. So it is common among displaced cultures attempting to make new roots in new countries. They may share their nationality, their music, their folklore, food preferences, sense of uniqueness. And so they want to kind of keep that bonding, or they want to be close to people who have that similar culture. So it was, kind of thought to encourage group solidarity, group bonding, and affiliation, and that's why this endogamy was encouraged, or people may just feel more comfortable with it, and so that's what endogamy is. Okay, then we come to culture. Okay, so what is culture? It's patterns of human behavior or activity which are unique to the specific group, and the culture will be passed on or taught from generation to the next generation. Now, here, if you look at this picture, I hope it's clear on your end as well, that this is, if this is an iceberg, what we see on the outside, is the material aspects of the culture. And what we don't see, the non-visible aspects of the culture, which are underneath the ocean, it's all a part of that culture. So what do we see that's unique about a culture is maybe their dress, their food, their language, their games, the art, festivals, rituals. So that's something that's visible of a culture. The part that's not visible are their beliefs. How do they handle emotions? How do they handle, certain health related issues? What are their ethics, their notions of time and time management, right? Remember we talked about chronic and monochronic cultures. So cultures that will multitask, or cultures that are perfectly on time, but they'll just do one thing at a time and then go on to the next task. What their communication style is. Are they competitive versus cooperative? What are their values? So these are all the non-visible aspects of culture. But this whole thing, this whole iceberg is your, what we call it as a culture. It may be visible or it may be invisible. So what are values? They are beliefs or ethics of a group in which they have some sort of an emotional investment in. So here, again, you want to know, what a culture is. You want to know what the differences are between values, norms. What does the word value stand for? Norms stand for mores. Okay, so when we are talking about values, right? So we already gave you in the last slide a little bit of a definition about what a value is. But values are basically standards by which, a group or a community may identify what's appropriate. This is not appropriate. This is good versus bad. This is desirable. This is not desirable. Okay, so that's called the values. Norms are the rules, okay, of behavior that develop to enforce these values. Okay, so these are a little bit, you can say, a little bit more stricter than just values. So these are some of the rules that have been developed in order to enforce these values. That's called the norm. What is mores? Mores become even more stricter now. So mores are the norms that are more strictly enforced because they're seen as essential to maybe very core group of values to that particular community or to that particular group. So here I can give you the example. What's a norm, in our daily life? A norm would be maybe there's somebody in front of you, you hold the door open for them, right? So that's considered a norm. Or sneezing in our elbow, it's a norm. You don't sneeze on another person's face. So those are, sort of the norms that we have. Now, mores would be, like I said, norms that are more strictly enforced. So in the past, or even maybe now in some communities, it's seen that it's considered a norm to have a child when a couple is married. Okay, that's considered a norm. But in certain maybe tribes, or you can say in certain communities in the past, or maybe still now, it is considered a big violation if there is a child that's born out of wedlock. Okay, so if that particular norm is more strictly enforced, it's considered a serious violation. It's called a more. Okay, so that sort of, I hope that makes it clear. Okay, so, now we go on to some other terminologies that are used when we're talking about culture is morals and ethics. Okay, so these are just, what ethics is. You have ethics in dentistry as well, and ethics with dealing with a patient. So these are judgments that define right or wrong behavior. It's not legally enforced, right? So the rules are something that are more socially enforced, right? So when we talk about laws, the laws is when the judicial system comes in and it's more formalized, more precise. So, we go down from morals and ethics to rules to laws. Okay, so then we talk about, cultural artifacts. So, when we're talking about cultures, all of the cultures, especially in the past, we could tell, okay, this, when they had, archaeologists would dig out some pottery or some other, coins, they could tell, that it came from this particular culture. So what's a cultural artifact? Object that's made or modified by a human culture that tells us something about those people who lived in that time and era. So, if you look at this first one, this is actually the oldest stone tool. It's about 1.5 to 2 million years ago. It was found in Kenya. So this is the oldest stone tool that was ever found on Earth. And it's pretty amazing. So, the next one, of course, is pottery that, the archaeologists find, and they can tell which, era, which century was made in, which culture made it. Of course, there could be coins. And what are the modern day artifacts that we can think of, right? So the modern day artifact that I could think of would be like a Walkman, right? I don't know, maybe 80s. And then the computer, that would be a modern day artifact. So maybe 300, 400, 500 years later, and somebody finds this and they would say, okay, it was an artifact from this era, So that's what a modern day artifact would be. Okay, so then we talk about what is a subculture. And again, reminding you guys, you should know what all these words mean, okay, because it is going to be on your exam. So subculture is a set of people with distinct set of behaviors and beliefs within a culture. So essentially you can call subculture is a group within a group, okay? So, within the same culture, maybe, a certain part of the population, they differentiate themselves depending upon maybe their age, okay, their gender, their ethnicity or race, their religion might be different, occupation, okay. So you can say, okay, all the dental hygienists, we have a subculture within this larger community, so that would be occupational subculture. Political affiliation, right, sexual orientation, or it could be a subculture based on which you're a fan of particular music or cinema or social media fans. So here I put it, the example, they're called Trekkies. So the fans who were of Star Trek series, right? So they would wear the Star Trek costumes, have that hairstyle. So that's called a subculture within a common culture. Okay, so what are the other examples that we have of subculture? In the 40s, there were these motorcycle clubs and gangs. In the 50s, there was the subculture of greasers and beatniks. So the greasers was like a youth subculture, predominantly working class, young adults and teenagers. It was, it came to be sort of like a little derogatory label, but then there was this American show, it was called The American Bandstand, that tried to sort of sanitize that negative image. And then in the 1960s began the era of, rock and roll, sex and drugs, hippies. You had the Beatles, Elvis Presley. So all that sort of, movement started. And then there was the movement for the Vietnam War protesters, right? So that was considered a subculture as well. Then, the hippie culture kind of continued into the 1970s, and if you've been to San Francisco or you visited the Haight-Ashbury, that was sort of their hub, right, for the hippie culture was San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury. Okay, so then what is a counterculture? So we talked about, subculture. A counterculture is a culture that has ideas and ways of behaving that are very consciously and deliberately different from that of that mainstream society or the main culture. So their thinking or their way of life will be totally opposite or very different from that mainstream society. Okay, so what would be an example of the counterculture was, specifically it was political opposition for a certain thing. So it could be political opposition, it would refer to the social revolution that swept through Western Europe, North America during the 60s and the 70s. So here we can, talk about the, I'm sorry. So the counterculture would have been, like we talked about, maybe it was mostly young adults who were trying to have opposing views from that of their parents, specifically regarding that political opinion at that time. So maybe if most of the parents at that time, initially there was a lot of support for the Vietnam War, so here the youth might have been against it, right? So that's like called a counterculture. And also it was the same people, they were against, the Cold War that was going on with the Soviet Union at that time. So that was called a counterculture because they were opposing the popular opinion of maybe the adults of that time, which was, the Vietnam War, being on Cold War with the Soviet Union, because the youth at that time, the ones in this counterculture, they felt, okay, we're gonna get into a third world war, we're gonna have another, nuclear war or something, really bad, war-wise is gonna happen. So that was the counterculture, called counterculture at that time during the 60s and the 70s. Okay, so then we go to the next one. So how are the nations of the world grouped according to the WHO? So this is called the gross national income. So that's how the nations of the world are grouped according to the levels of their economic development. So in the past, it was called, and that was erroneous in calling it the first world, second world, or third world countries, because that had essentially nothing to do with the production of the national income. It was more so who was aligned, whether with the Western Bloc or with the Soviet Bloc, or or not aligned with anyone. So that was the basic premise of the first, second, and the third world nations. But somehow they carried it on to grouping them according to economic development as well, which was again a wrong way of thinking. So now the WHO has a more formal way of grouping the nations. It's high income or the developed nations, and this one they gave a GNI or the gross national income if it is $12,400 or more. So the gross national income just means how much the country produces as far as the any investments that are made by that country, any goods and services that are produced by the country, and divided by the population of that country. So the ones that are come under the high income countries are mostly the capitalist countries. So they do have more technologically advanced society. The citizens in general will have a higher standard of living. So all these countries, US, Canada, Germany, Australia, Sweden, Switzerland, they all come under this category. So not essentially, would we call, Canada as a purely capitalist, because Canada does have a little bit of a socialist aspect as well, especially because it has free healthcare. It does have a lot of welfare programs, but we just group them under the developed countries because of the amount of GNI that they make. And these countries will have more, the citizens will have more access to care. So, so the GNI has a direct relationship to how much access to healthcare that they can get. Then the second one are the middle income economies. This is from 1,026 to 12,400 gross national income. So these are the different countries: Russia, South Africa, China, Malaysia, Egypt, India, Turkey. The major challenges is they are developing their healthcare and their infrastructure, the hospitals. They may have hospitals and clinics in some areas a lot more than maybe the rural areas. The supplies and equipment, again, they're in the process of developing them. They don't really have a very well set system yet developed for paying their healthcare personnel. So, so that is the middle income economies. Then we come to the low income economies where the production of the GNI is less than 1,026. And so Haiti, Somalia, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, so in these countries, we see a lack of formal protection for healthcare. And a lot of, people that we see immigrate from there, maybe they may not have, sought care there because they did not have necessary funds. They didn't have, a very bare minimal public health system, so the public health system wasn't developed enough so that they could seek care even if they did have the money. So may rely on home remedies. Again, that's that could be true in other economies as well, but this is more like a generalization that we're seeing. Okay, so culturally sensitive healthcare. So now the culturally sensitive healthcare is any healthcare system that is accessible and respects all beliefs, attitudes, and lifestyles. So our goal when we say a culturally sensitive healthcare is to grant the best possible care to each patient. It doesn't matter where, which region they live, which culture they're from, what language they speak. Our goal should be to provide the best possible care and access, to everyone. Okay. So what are these concepts relating to dental hygiene? So first off, again, we've talked about it so many times before: recognize or examine your own personal bias. Determine, if you have any language barrier, right? So you can use an interpreter. You conduct all patient assessments with sensitivity in mind regarding that culture. Identify any religious or health-related beliefs, views, or maybe they have a misconception, right? So if there is some misconception, it's a level of slow education that goes on. You cannot suddenly put your opinion out there and expect, that person in front of you to adopt your concept. So it's a low, and when the one that trust sort of builds in, that's when you can slowly start educating the patient. Then you always check the verbal and non-verbal signs. Okay, so the basic, we've talked about all these cultural sensitivities and communication. So what we say still is that the human needs theory, so remember the human needs theory, the triangle that we had on the pyramid, it transcends all ages, all cultures, genders, nationalities. It's common to all humans, okay? So the human need fulfillment, it says, emphasizes a more humanistic approach to any dental hygiene care. So what we are saying, so look at the last line, is that any unsatisfied needs can motivate human behavior and guide the patient to oral wellness. So that is more important than anything else. So remember, there was all these needs: physiological, safety, love and belonging, esteem. And I talked about it before as well. I was a question as well on your previous exam. And these are all the deficit needs. So if a person comes in who's deficient in any of these needs, they will be motivated, as long as they know how to move up, on that pyramid to meet that need. So the top one, the self-actualization, once all the lower needs are met, this is just about being the best you can be. So that's just a being need, a growth need. It's not a deficit need. They're not going to be, everybody's not going to be motivated to, be the best they can be. Okay, so then we come to the next word or the concept. It's called holism or humanism. So holism, if you look at the word itself, it's more like holistic, right? Holistic means you treat the person as a whole, rather than just thinking of that person as, okay, this dental problem. You treat the whole person, taking into account any of their social factors, their mental factors, any maybe economic factors that they may have, rather than just the physical symptoms. And then we consider ourselves as practitioners, we are treating them holistically, or we call it holism. So we treat patients as a whole, biological, social, and spiritual being, including all their uniqueness that they may carry. Okay. All right. So I think we've already talked about why do we need to, study all this diversity, and why do we need to study about all the different cultures. Is because we've got to understand that in US we do have a very diverse population, and we are moving towards even further diverse population, in the next coming decades. So if you see in 1995, the minority population or the linguistic and cultural, diversity was only 26%. 2010, it's already 32%, and by now 2020, it's already probably up. And 2050, it will be approximately 50% of the US population will be ethnic and racial minorities. So that's the reason why we need to be able to study this and be open to this diversity. Okay, so how do we achieve diversity? So historically, what was true was like, okay, we're talking maybe in the 1960s or, 70s. If you were a person of, a different race or ethnicity, you would probably be seeing patients of that same ethnicity, that same racial group. So saying like maybe 1960s or something, if you were Hispanic, you'd probably have all your patient population might be just Hispanic. The doctor would be seeing just most of those patients would be the same ethnicity. So it says that's no longer true, right? So in today's day and age, physicians and dentists and hygienists, we must alter, that traditional way of treating patients, because we are seeing all, diversity of population. It's no longer what it was 50 years ago, where the patient would just go to their own ethnicity doctor. That's no longer true. The patients will seek out anyone. They are not going to be sticking to just the same ethnicity. So the healthcare providers must have the knowledge and the skills that will make them attentive to the differences of their patients. So the other thing that we sort of go on to is that when a patient comes in, their health behavior may not be totally up to par, or may not be what we want. And when we are promoting patient health behaviors, some behaviors over here in the US, may be considered good or bad or indifferent, right? Or what we are telling them, they may consider those, sort of oral health behaviors or in general health behaviors good, bad, or indifferent, depending on what culture they're from. So if maybe they're not accepting our recommendations, we may just, wrongly label the patient as, oh, the patient is difficult. The patient is uncooperative, unmotivated, the patient is non-compliant. But it may not be that. It may be, in that particular culture where they came from, the recommendation that you're giving them may not fit their lifestyle, may not fit their values. So we should not be quick to sort of wrongly label a patient as, all of these. Okay, so evidence-based research. So this again goes down to, saying that if we're giving a recommendation, the patient is telling, oh, this is what I'm used to doing, don't just outright, say, no, that's wrong, because you don't know anything about, that particular habit of theirs, or maybe it's something traditional, So don't outright, say, no, that's wrong. We have to go mostly by evidence-based research. So the wording or the verbiage that we can use is, we can look up what they're doing, research it up, and then say something like, research indicates, or the tests verify that, whatever our recommendation is, studies show that flossing does this. So, so that's the wordings that we should use when we're showing them an educational tools that they may not be used to, any treatment, plans that might be something they've never heard of before. Maybe it's a deep cleaning, they've never heard of what a SRP is. We're going to tell them about the research. Okay, the research indicates SRP, is effective at reversing gingivitis. So we're going to use evidence-based research, not just our own opinions when we're talking to a patient. So then we come on to, so not just immigrants, so what are refugee? And in the next, since I'm covering, the next lecture today as well, so we'll talk a little bit more about what a refugee is in the next PowerPoint. So here you can see, the origin of the refugees that come to the U.S. It may vary from year to year depending on, what sort of political, scenario is in a particular country at that time. So U.S. might have granted people of a certain country refugee status at the time. So the number of people coming in that time is more from, let's say the refugee status was given to the people in Soviet Union at one point, so there would be a lot more people coming in from there, maybe from Afghanistan, so it was given in for a few years, so there'd be a lot more people coming in from that particular area. So this is just showing you the origins of the U.S. refugee arrivals. It just kind of goes down in 2019 to 2020, that's when, our President Trump, he put sort of a cap on, the refugees that could come in, but, so that was kind of the lowest one, that because there was just a cap, they, couldn't, no more refugees were allowed to come in. So we see that kind of going down over there. Okay. So then, we go on to a study here. So this was the dental caries of refugee children as compared to the US children. So there was a dental study that was done, 224 children. Most of the children were either African, Eastern European, or they might have been from the Middle East, so maybe we can call them Asian, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Middle East. So these were the three regions of origin of those refugee children. So this was the questions, that were asked of, for the children or the parents to fill out. So let's say, so the first one was, have you ever been to the dentist? So if you see the Africa, the 87% said no. The Asian children said 73% said no, they've never been to a dentist. Compared it to European, only 46% said no, they had never been to a dentist. So the second question that was asked was, have you used a toothbrush in your home country? No. So this was again, very consistently high at almost 90% in Africa said no, they'd never used a toothbrush. Then we compared it to almost 80%, Afghan, Pakistan, Middle East, 80% said no, they'd never used a toothbrush. Now compared it to Europe, 35%, so majority of them, 65% had used a toothbrush. So now if you're looking at this, what do we deduce from this study is that most of the refugee children that are coming from Africa or, the Middle East and Asia, most of them have not been to a dentist, most of them have not used toothbrush in their home country, right? So, what do we presume from this? That okay, they would have a lot higher rate of decay, right? Because of these two things. Whereas the European refugee children, they've a lot of them, maybe they're equally split between they've been to the dentist, and they have a lot of them, yes to using a toothbrush. So that's what we deduce, that they, the ones from Africa and the Middle East, they will have a lot worse teeth conditions. So what were the results of the study? However, what did the results of the study show? The African refugee children had significantly lower caries experience and fewer untreated caries than Eastern Europeans. Okay, so here is what we don't want to be quick to assume things. Okay, that's what I wanted you to see this study. Just because we are practicing modern medicine does not mean that our oral care would be better. So we don't want to be assuming because they've never seen a dentist, they haven't been using a modern, oral hygiene aid like a toothbrush, their teeth are going to be bad. That's what our first thought is, but that's not true. So the African refugee children actually had a lot lower caries. So what would be the possible reasons? Maybe they had natural fluoride, the diet, right? Their diet would be more natural. They didn't have as much refined sugar. Their cultural beliefs and practices, maybe they weren't snacking as much. Okay, so, but, again, the other part of it, side of the coin, is they're also less likely to see a dentist even after immigrating because they haven't been used to, seeing dentists. So that's where we have to, think that, okay, they had lower caries because of the area that they were in, right? Because of all these things. But now they're immigrated here, their diet is going to change. The natural fluoride may change. They're bringing about a change in their cultural practices. So, but on the other hand, their diet changes, more refined sugar, but they're less likely to see a dentist, which is not good once they immigrate here. So, this is again, showing you the stick. So that's what, instead of toothbrush, that's what they've been using. So, and this again, there have been studies and research done on this, and it shows that it does have, the stick does have fluorides and, alkaloids, some essential oils and tannins and, anthraquinones. All of these are protective. So, the children, they start using these about 6 years of age, and unless, they're introduced to formal toothbrushing, they will continue to do, use this their entire life, along with the good diet. So that's what is naturally protective against decay. Okay, so here again, we're comparing the sugar consumption, right? We talked about what the differences might be. Why did we see less caries from the African children? So if we're looking at the sugar consumption, so, we say that 15 kilograms of sugar per year is associated with decay. So the African children, if you look at it, they're only consuming in Liberia 3.1 kilograms, maybe in Somalia a little bit more at 17 kilograms. Look at Eastern European, 15 kilograms was considered associated with decay. In Eastern Europe, it's 24, almost 25 kgs. US is 32 kgs, okay? So sugar consumption wise, we're doing a lot worse. Okay, so what does the WHO say? So the WHO says consume less than 5% of your daily energy needs as free sugars. That's equivalent to only 5 teaspoons of sugar a day. And that 5 teaspoons could be in the form of, any drinks, juices, cookies or cakes or, anything refined, that's going to be just 5 teaspoons a day. That's the WHO guidelines for health, not just oral health. So, and if somebody is having a can of Coke, so I searched this up, just a single can of Coke, it contains 9 teaspoons of sugar a day. So think about how much sugar, our patients are, if we're drinking Coke, how much excess we're drinking already with that 1 can of Coke. We're supposed to just have 5 teaspoons the whole day, but just that 1 can of Coke is, going way beyond that limit. Okay, so then we come on to access to oral healthcare, and that access is very important, especially because we in the U.S. as a nation is, come of course under the developed nations or the high income group, right? So we should provide access to oral healthcare. Doesn't matter if it's rural or poor urban areas. Everyone should have access to oral healthcare. It should be within a reasonable distance, or transportation should be available to that oral healthcare place. They should be open maybe weekends. What are the logistics? Is health insurance available to all the population groups? Are we welcoming and acceptable to people of different cultures? So the access to oral healthcare depends on all of these different points here. So how can we eliminate the disparities that may arise in access to oral healthcare? So at the institution level, okay, at the bigger level. So we can recruit and retain culturally diverse faculty, culturally diverse students, right? That's at the institution level. Then we offer ongoing professional development to support, the faculty in acquisition of cultural knowledge, of cultural awareness and skills to communicate with, maybe students of different cultures. And then we do provide a demographic data on oral health of the different population groups and whether they are getting the preventive services that they need, or they do need more preventive services. So that's what we can do at an institution level. Then we go on to the next one. So at the student level, how can we eliminate disparities? So you as a student, should take more opportunities to learn more about the oral health of a different diverse population group. Engage in activities that provide you with opportunity to learn more about cultures and different values. So always eliminating the disparities or, cross-cultural competency comes from learning within your community, right? So that's very, very important. So you always start to be culturally competent first within your community, and then you expand outward into your population, that's your diverse population, patient population group. Okay, so you start practicing wherever you live in your community itself. So, but the last slide will just say that we are more alike than we are different. So again, there was another Human Genome Project that said our DNA is 99.9% the same between all different, groups, and the differences between people only account for less than just 1% of our DNA. So in other words, celebrate and appreciate the differences of one another while keeping it in mind that we are still part of the same human family or the same human race. All right. So I'm going to start with the next lecture. So give me just a minute and you guys go to the, next week, and you will find the next lecture there. Okay, so I'll just give you a minute, for you guys to sort of go on to the next one. So I hope, has everybody sort of found the next one? That's this one is, yeah, that's okay, Lauren. I read your message. Okay, so hopefully everybody has, has this, the next PowerPoint up. And this should be in this week's. Okay, so if you guys are ready, let me go ahead and start. So I'm not gonna, since this was supposed to be for the next week, it was just mostly first one or two slides I just review. So what's cultural competence? The ability to integrate the current knowledge of oral healthcare with the ways of multiple cultures. Okay, so again, you already know this. So here, oral health professionals, we're not expected to become fluent in multiple languages or, be fluent in knowing all the different, what the cultures, their values are and everything. but rather just be proactive in using different tools to enhance communication and just to understand, the different communities. That's all we ask. So cross-cultural dental hygiene is, what is it? It's effective integration of the patient's background into your dental hygiene process of care. Okay, so that includes their social, ethnic, religious, economic realities. So economic realities is important as well. Okay, so why do we need all this healthcare, communication? Is, so once we understand the local cultures, and we will understand that these different cultures and their values do influence what the patient is doing at home, as well as whether they come in to see you, and what their healthcare practices are. So once you are more aware of that, you will strive to, or you will be able to better communicate, educate, and motivate this diverse population. So again, cultural diversity, how is it evident in? I'm not going to go over all of this. We already talked about the iceberg, whatever is visible above the ocean, are the visible aspects of the culture underneath the ocean of that iceberg was the, things that are invisible, part of that culture, but the whole thing, includes the culture. So here we're going to talk about the culture and what its influence may be on diet as well as on oral health. So food habits are among the oldest, most deeply entrenched aspects of culture. Okay, so these food habits are not easy to change. If we try to forcibly change them, either we as, in the oral healthcare field, or a nutritionist or doctor, if you try to forcibly change, those cultural food habits, it can produce an unwelcome reaction by the patient or the client. The best dental diets here, we'll say, appear to be those, of course, that are lowest in processed sugar, any refined foods, right? Which means the more we are refining our foods, the worse we are doing for our general health as well as oral health. So more we stay with the whole foods, the whole grains, the better off we are health-wise. So example on the bottom is like a Mediterranean diet. So, we say that the best diet is a whole food diet. This is demonstrated by the fact that against all odds, right, we looked at that study, the developing countries in Africa where the diets lack processed sugar, they have surprisingly very low tooth decay rates, right? It's not just because, just their diet, it maybe they're using other, aids as well. So we do not understand that right off, but we have to look into the fact that yes, diet is a big factor in oral health as well. So now we just talk about diet itself and how just a basic awareness on how people, according to different religious beliefs or different regions, may have a very different variation in the sort of diet that they're having. So food selection may be based on religious beliefs. So some people may be strict vegetarian, or some may avoid certain types of foods or certain types of meats, depending on their religious affiliation. It may also be based on the type of crops that are grown in the area. Maybe they're not used to certain crops that were not grown in that area. What the facilities were for preservation and storage of those crops, right? So that's how, the culture, had a certain diet, and that kept on going on from generation to the next. So certain examples now. So for religion, we talk about Buddhism, they're mostly vegetarian, but they will not include pungent foods like garlic and scallions and onions. In Hinduism, most of them will exclude eating meats, specifically beef, because cow is considered, that it's a provider of milk, so they don't want to kill the cattle. In Judaism and Islam, they prohibit eating pork. eat kosher or halal. So those are mostly, the foods that are prepared in accordance with certain, rules or certain rituals, and that's why they've given those words to them. On the other hand, there might be some religions which may prohibit, eating foods which are made with, rituals. So, so religion has its own influence on the diet. Then, if we look at the different regions, the people from certain parts of Asia or Africa or Latin countries, they may be lactose intolerant. So we can't tell them, okay, have a lot more milk, drink more milk. It will give you more calcium, your teeth, your bones will become stronger, because they may just be lactose intolerant. And they haven't been used to drinking that much milk, over their lifetime. So in African countries, maybe they eat more corn. In Asian countries, they may eat more wheat or rice, depending on which region in Asia they're from. Maybe they're pickling their vegetables. So Latin, they may eat more pork or goat or poultry. So we see that, we don't have to kind of remember what each region or what each religion is telling them to do or not do. But just to see that there is a lot of, things that may be excluded in certain areas or religions. Maybe they promote certain foods and religions. So that's all we need to be aware of. And of course, whenever we do have questions, we see a not a verbal, but you can say a paraverbal sort of a response from a patient that they're kind of backing up. You can ask more questions. Okay, is this something that you can do? Is this, recommendation or the diet recommendation, does it go well with you? So you can always ask a question if you want to clarify things. Okay, so remember we talked about the refugees in the last one. So here we get to the definition of a refugee. Again, it's important. It's probably going to be on your exam as well. So refugee, one who flees in search of refuge in times of war, political oppression, religious persecution. So, I showed you that graph in the previous PowerPoint. You'll have another one coming up. But in the year 1990 to 95, so we had, about 100,000, refugees coming to the U.S., and most of them were from the former Soviet Union, because, there was given that refugee status. Then in 2002, it dropped from this about 116,000 to 27,000, which was an all-time low because of those September 11, the terrorist attacks. Then from 2008 to 2017, again, up a little bit, about 67,000. Most of them, or half of more, were coming from Asia. A lot of them, Iraq and Burma. Okay, so like I told you, it just depends on which country or which area got the refugee status, depending on the political oppression, or depending on if there was persecution or war going on. In 2019, the cap was done, so it was brought down from mostly yearly. It used to be like 67,000. It was brought down in 2019 to 30,000, but now it's been almost increased back to the normal. So it's 62,500 now in this year that I checked. So it's already gone back to the normal that used to be 67,000 per year of refugees. So this next graph shows you the shifting origins of the refugees that are coming to the US. I had it in the previous one as well, but this one is it makes it a little bit more sort of clear, because it also gives an explanation, why. So in 1975, it tells us, and here it tells us, people from Europe, Asia, Latin America, or Africa. So there were a lot more people from Asia here, and it says refugees from Vietnam. Okay, so in 1980, the Refugee Act just raises the overall quota on the number of refugees that are allowed in the country. So here again, there we see, more the blues, that is Europe, and that's because of the refugees coming from the Soviet Union. Then in 2004, it says 50% of the overall admitted were from Somalia, Cuba, and Laos. And then we see the Europe kind of go down, the refugees, and then a lot more are coming from Asia. The green is Asia, and it says Burma, Bhutan were granted the refugee status. Okay, so the refugees are coming into the U.S. now. Which are the top states? Where are these refugees going? So the top state was Texas, Washington, New York, and then California. Pretty similar as well, and then the rest of the other states. Okay, so when a refugee comes in, remember that is a formal and official process. They have to apply to get the refugee status. So all the newly arrived refugees in the US are entitled to a comprehensive health assessment. And this assessment programs, it also include providing free dental screenings. And why does the Department of Public Health do that? To control if there is any communicable diseases that may be coming with the refugees. Maybe that communicable disease is more prevalent in that area, so they want to be able to control those communicable diseases, and also to improve the general health status of those refugees. Of course, they provide screenings, treatments, and follow-up. So we already talked about this, the study that about the refugee children, from the 3 different areas compared to the U.S. now. So even to the U.S., so it said we'll talk about the Carey's experience, compared to the U.S., but pretty similar Carey's experience. But, we know that those refugee children did not have access to oral health care or access to a dentist or dental hygienist. So it says dental care is, a major unmet health need of the children. The oral health assessments as a part of the program were conducted within 1 month of their arrival to the US. So what do we call decay in those studies is any untreated caries, any filling that they have is also considered, a caries experience, or a molar that is missing from extraction because of caries. So these were all considered a part of the caries experience. So here, in the previous lecture, that the same study we were discussing between the different regions, like Africa to Europe to Asian countries, right? So now we're considering all the ethnicities as a whole compared to US. So it says all the different ethnicities as a whole, 51% had caries, okay, and 48% untreated decay. So if we compare that to US children had a very similar caries experience. So there was 51% of the refugees, US children had caries experience almost similar, 50%, okay. But here, the refugee children had 48% untreated decay. But here we have more percentage of kids who have been treated, right? Because we have access to a dentist in the US. So significantly lower risk of untreated decay. So most of them have had access to a dentist in the US and they've had fillings. So that is, the comparison. Okay. So, many of the children, they have not been exposed to the oral health measures, but you as a hygienist, you need to be aware of the potential oral health problems among the refugee children, as well as maybe the resistance of the parents to bringing them to the dentist. So we need to be aware of that, as well as providing oral education to the children and the parents as well. Okay, so we're done. This is our last slide. To wrap up, important to be culturally sensitive, ask questions.
Hello? Oh, so the car is ready? Okay. I'm gonna pick up it after I'm working today. Maybe after 5 o'clock, okay? Maybe 5:30. Tomorrow? No, I can't. I'm sorry. over lunch. Sure, I can come at 12:30. 12:30, okay? So I will call you before I get there, okay? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Here there are 3 parts to it. Everybody's papers or their PDF version of that research is due next week. Okay, and then your PowerPoint presentation is gonna go first. Then next you're gonna be presenting your group play or the video. So how long? I have given each of you, about 15 minutes to present it. Since, there's 2 groups, you basically have overall 20 minutes per group. Okay, so you can sort of, see what, if your PowerPoint is going longer, you might have a little bit shorter of role play, but you have 20 minutes per group, so that makes it 40 minutes. We will have about a few minutes after one group does to have a discussion about it, if anybody wants to ask any questions, and then we start with the second group. So I hope, Gabriel, it's sort of, it's up to you, but you will have, between your PowerPoint presentation and your group role play, it should not take longer than 20 minutes. Okay. Yeah, but it shouldn't be like a 5-minute long. It should definitely be a little bit, longer. And okay, let me just actually pause the recording. Okay, so any more questions? If not, then I will turn this off. Reading off a script, it may not just come out very natural. So I really hope, so whenever, think about whenever you do watch a play, then nobody's just reading off of a script. Or remember, if you were to do it live, you were not going to be reading off a script. So that will not come out very natural. So remember, you were getting the points for it. So, yes, I want you guys to prepare a script so you know what you're talking about. It shouldn't be totally impromptu, Gabriel, but have a script, but you want to be able to rehearse it so that it comes more natural. Okay, but yes, you can have it somewhere close by, but it should not be that you're totally kind of looking at a paper and reading off of it. It's not just gonna come out very real. All right, perfect. And most important thing, have fun with it. Don't just stress out over it. This is supposed to be more like a fun group building sort of an activity. So there's no right or wrong for when you're speaking something. So don't worry about it. Okay. All right, excellent. Have fun, you guys, and I'll see you next week, and I'll send out the team's invite as well.